Pleasure to be here.
Talk about your book. So how would you characterize what the biggest threat to Israel's future is?
I think there are several. I think we have to deal with the issue of occupation, with the Palestinian issue, but definitely right now the greatest threat is Iran. But I do not think that Iran should be perceived as an Israeli issue or as a Benjamin Netanyahu issue. I think that's a major mistake done by many players. Iran, in my mind, is a civilization challenge. If Iran goes nuclear, the Middle East will go nuclear and our world will change. So it's true that Tel Aviv will be affected first, but some years down the line, New York and Chicago will be affected as well. So let us not see Iran as an Israel issue. This is a challenge to Western civilization.
And where do you stand on how we're handling sanctions or lack thereof and the process so far?
Look, I try to look at the bigger picture. This is what I do in my book regarding my country, and this is what I try to do regarding this. I think we should look at Iran, as I said, it's such a critical challenge, and I think the last decade, never mind whose fault it is, Americans, Israelis, Europeans, Democrats, Republicans, whatever, we generally, as the West, we failed on Iran. Iran is ahead in the game. It achieved a technological victory, and if we're not careful, it will achieve a political victory. So in my mind, when we address, we were talking about the last year. Next year, in my mind, is a critical year, and it's a critical year about Iran, because if we make the West, make another mistake on Iran, following all the mistakes we made over a decade, that will be a critical mistake, and as I said, it will change our way of life in this country, in Europe, definitely in Israel.
Let's stipulate that Iran weaponizing itself, having a nuclear weapon, is a global issue. Let's get to Israel in terms of its present and its immediate future and the settlements. If you cannot resolve that internal issue of settlements, what does the future bode?
I'm very troubled about this, but I'm hopeful that there is an Israeli center, there is an Israeli silent majority that is reasonable about the territories and the settlements. My claim is that if the international community, led by the United States, will bring about a new realistic peace concept that addresses the fact that the Middle East is a brutal region. We just saw the killing in Syria. You have to realize what a rough neighborhood we live in. If the new peace concept will address that reality, I believe that Israelis will go, there will be an Israeli majority that will go with a moderate, reasonable peace process that solves the problems of occupation and settlement. If the peace concept will be perceived as naive and detached from reality, then we are heading for trouble.
So I think you laid out a vision for how the Israeli-Palestinian issue could get solved. I think we all know what you were referring to, how it might work. But just to go back to Iran for a second, because I'm still confused. And you talk about the big picture, but the big picture ultimately becomes the little picture of what do we actually do? So in your view, what do we actually do to avoid this threat that you, I think correctly, point out is just a massive threat to the whole world?
Some have said that this deal, the Geneva deal, was a historical mistake, like my Prime Minister. Some have said it's a historical success. I claim that this is a historical challenge. The 6-month period of time created by the deal, never mind if the deal is a good one, bad one, these are critical months. If the United States will end its partners will adopt a very assertive diplomatic approach in Iran, I'm somewhat optimistic. If not so, we'll be in trouble. And in this sense, I think that the president's policy in 2011, 2012, which was very tough, with tough sanctions, tough rhetorics, putting all options on the table, all that worked. If that approach will be abandoned now, then the Iranians might, God forbid, win the battle, the political battle. But if this approach will be promoted while the negotiations are going on, in the kind of deal that will be struck or negotiated, then let's hope for a real political diplomatic solution, which is obviously the best.
But it does sound like you disagree with your Prime Minister a little bit in that you're willing to give the 6-month process a chance as opposed to immediately declaring it a failure.
I'm an independent journalist and a thinker and individual. I don't represent my government. I think that Benjamin Netanyahu is worth listening to because basically his diagnosis of the challenge of Iran is accurate. And he saw many things ahead of the curve when others did not see it. So I respect him, and I think he he should be listened to. And yet, I do not think that this should be an Israel matter. This should not be a Netanyahu matter. And I think we have to give these negotiations a chance.
Do you think that there's still kind of a credible threat that the U.S. will use force there?
I think the right solution on Iran was a very assertive diplomatic one. I think the great mistake that Iran was not under real economic political siege. That would have been the best solution. I hope, because we see that they are in trouble, we see this competition, there is a race. On the one hand, sanctions are working and are threatening the regime. On the other hand, their centrifuges there are too many centrifuges. There should not have been 19,000 centrifuges. So I think there is still room for very assertive sanctions combined with initiative diplomacy. Look at what worked in Syria. I think that actually Syria is a success.
What worked in Syria?
I mean, I'll tell you what happened in Syria. In Syria, I think I'm saddened by the fact that the Russians took the credit. This is the bad news that came out of Syria. The good news is that when you had a credible threat by the West with ingenuity, political ingenuity, you solved the chemical weapon issue in Syria in a remarkable way. If that kind of approach we'll see on Iran, I'm hopeful. But if we will mislead ourselves, as we misled ourselves for years, all of us, again, Israelis are as much to blame as any others. If we elude ourselves, we actually might change our world, and then we will not feel the ramifications right now. But in 10 years down the line, when we'll be in a different world, really with nuclear threats all over, where the 21st century might become a nuclear century, and we do not want that, and the time to prevent that is now. 2014 is critical to maintain the post-Nagasaki miracle of a nuclear stable world.
You write in the book, on the one hand, Israel is the only nation in the West that is occupying another people. On the other hand, we are the only nation in the West that is existentially threatened. Both occupation and intimidation make the Israeli condition unique. Intimidation and occupation have become the two pillars of our condition. So is that sort of the root of anxiety and doubt that Israelis feel?
Absolutely. And what I urge, usually people on the left concentrate on occupation and ignore intimidation. People on the right, everywhere, tend to emphasize intimidation and ignore occupation. I say, look at Israel, look at the conflict, and look at the Middle East with all its complexity. If you don't wrestle with the complexity, you don't get it. If you will see that these are the two pillars of the conflict and Israel's existence, I think we can deal with occupation and intimidation.
Do you think the world, the United States specifically, people of the United States, understand, fully comprehend the psychic baggage, the weight of living in Israel?
Look, first of all, I'm a great admirer of America. I think that sometimes Americans don't respect or don't remember how great America is. In the American century gave the world relative stability, relative peace. It stabilized the Middle East, and it enabled Israel to live. So first of all, I'm grateful for what America is, and I really pray that America will be strong and wise, because there is no other leadership for the world. Any other leadership for the world is dangerous. I think that actually we really have shared values. I think that Americans sympathize with my country basically in a remarkable way. But I think that our extreme forces in Israel, the extreme right and the extreme religious, are endangering that relationship. So it's my duty to fight the darker sides of Israel and bring about benign Israel. I think that if we'll have a benign Israel, most Americans will continue feeling this strong sense of affinity, which is not just a strategic relationship. There's really a deep bond between the great democracy you are and this tiny frontier democracy that we are.
All right, the book is My Promised Land, The Triumph and Tragedy of Israel. Ari Shabit, thank you so much for being on the show this morning.
Thank you.
On tomorrow's show, the UK's Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, will be here on the set.